Hello everyone, I am Nivedita Jana from Ambika Prasad Research Foundation. Welcome to all of you to our channel Biodiversity and Conservation. Today the topic is about the central themes in wildlife ecology. So let's start. The central themes of wildlife ecology, central to wildlife conservation and management as reviewed by Reslow. The habitat is a core concept in wildlife ecology. The term habitat has been used in both an organism-specific context and also in a land-based context. More commonly, wildlife ecologists define habitat as the area where an animal lives, including all resources, both biotic and abiotic, that affect survival and reproduction. This operational definition is similar to the spatial need of a species. Use of geographic information systems to map distributions of wildlife species and their habitats has made it possible to analyze multiple habitat variables simultaneously. For example, vegetation, soil, climatic conditions, physiographic features, distribution of other species. Modern studies of wildlife habitat are multivariate in nature. Wildlife ecologists often are interested in changing the quality of habitat for a given species or suite of species. The habitat quality usually is defined in terms of the contribution of resources to survival and reproduction of individuals, that is, fitness, and to persistence of populations. So consequently, habitat quality is assessed based on long-term data on demographics of individuals and populations. Then the resource selection. Habitat selection, or more broadly resource selection, is a central theme in wildlife ecology. Resources are defined as something that an individual requires to survive and reproduce and may include items such as food, shelter, densities, or space. Resources are the components that collectively comprise habitat for an organism. An underlying assumption is that animals choose resources in a manner that increases fitness, that is survival and reproduction, and hence that these behaviors are shaped by natural selection. Behavioral choice of resources can be innate, learned, or copied from specifics, and wildlife ecologists make inferences about what resources are selected by animals by measuring use of resources and comparing it to availability of those resources in the environment. If proportional use of a particular resource exceeds proportional availability, then that resource is concluded to be selected. In contrast, if proportional use is less than availability, the resource is determined to be avoided. If an animal is not making choices about resources, then measured use of a resource is expected to be in proportion to availability of that resource in an environment. And the selection of resources by wildlife occurs at multiple spatial scales or levels. The geographic range of a species represents the broadcast level of selection. Within populations, animals select ranges within which they restrict movements, and within those areas, some locations or resources are used more frequently than others. For example, herbivores may choose to forest in a particular type of forest, and within that forest may select specific forage species, individual plants, and particular parts of the plants. Given the hierarchical nature of these behaviors, wildlife ecologists often seek to understand resource selection on multiple levels. Then patterns of space use, distribution of individuals and species is closely related to resource selection and is another central theme in wildlife ecology. Several factors like influence the size and structure of areas used by individual animals. Scientists have documented broad ecological patterns across taxa demonstrating that factors such as body size, trophic level, and sociality have shaped the evolution of species. Within taxa, abundance and dispersion of resources, population density, season, and the presence of predators or competitors also influences how wildlife views space. Additionally, individual characteristics such as age, sex, and breeding status can alter resource requirements, which contribute to the variation in space use that occurs within species. Home range is a conceptual cornerstone of space use in wildlife ecology. Home range is defined as the area used by an animal during activities of seeking food, shelter, and reproduction, and generally excludes exploratory movements out of the area of common use. And the territories are defended home ranges which may be held by single individuals, mated pairs, or groups such as packs of wolves. Then coming to population growth and regulation. Understanding factors that affect abundance and population growth in wildlife species is a primary interest of wildlife ecologists. The concept of an ecological carrying capacity is that availability of resources in the environment limits the size of the population that can be supported in a certain area. In practice, the carrying capacity is challenging to quantify, likely varies over time, and may not be represented by the actual population size. Other factors such as predation or disease may restrict the population below the level that would be determined by resource limitation. Limiting factors, whether food, predation, or disease, are of interest to wildlife managers because strategies that alter such limiting factors can potentially be designed to increase size or viability of populations. The relative stability of most wildlife populations suggests that populations are not only limited but also regulated in some fashion. The concept of regulation refers to the tendency of most wildlife populations to retain a relative constancy of size over time, and regulation occurs through changes in survival or reproduction that vary with density of the population, and hence such factors are termed density dependent factors. Then wildlife genetics. Genetics techniques have been applied to diverse ecological questions for wildlife populations. Traditionally, DNA extracted from blood or tissue samples collected from captured animals has been used to quantify levels of genetic diversity within and divergence among wildlife populations. Recently, non-invasive genetic sampling has allowed extraction of DNA from feces, hair, soft skin cells, and feathers without handling animals. Such non-invasive techniques have been used to detect presence of uncommon species, to count individuals and estimate population size in a mark recapture framework, to identify gender, and to examine population structure and mating systems. Growth of metapopulation theory and recognition that many wildlife species persist in spatially structured populations have led to increased interest in quantifying demographic and genetic connections among populations. Questions about environmental features, both natural and anthropogenic, that act as filters or barriers to movement of individuals and genes among populations are now being addressed using genetic techniques. The emerging field of landscape genetics integrates the disciplines population genetics, landscape ecology, and spatial statistics to address such questions.